What's up, everybody? Today we begin a brand new series, and I am so excited about this one. I'm excited to invite you to join me over the next 6 episodes of a series called The Real Issues. And basically it talks about the real issues behind Christian mental health. So many topics that we will be diving into. Do I have enough faith? Is it just in my head? Should I be able to even pray this away? Am I broken? Why do I feel guilty or ashamed even? There are so much that we're going to dive into. And I even have a brand new resource for you. Again, absolutely free, but you have to stick around to the end to get it. And I'll tell you how to get a hold of that after this interview. My dear friend, Jordan Loftis, is going to join us today. And I am so proud of Jordan. This dude, I am grateful to call him a friend. He is my producer of this podcast. He's also my editor. And he's done so much for me and so much for this book. And I'm grateful to call him a friend, but even more, just more proud of him for this story he's about to share with you. The courage that it took to open up and just be very vulnerable with you. And I think not only is it going to help him by shedding light into a dark area of his life, but it's going to help so many of you. So I am so grateful that he's joining me today. All that and more happens right after this. Yo, welcome back to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. I am your host, Andy Howard. And man, I got to tell you, today is a dream come true. Seriously, this is a dude that started off as a professional relationship or a business sense relationship, but we have become friends, and this guy is genuine, and I absolutely love this man. So I am excited to have my dear friend, I can say that now, my dear friend, Jordan Loftis, join the podcast. What's up, Jordan? How are you, man?
Hey, Andy, I'm so good, and I'm excited to do this.
Well, thank you for doing this, man. And it's an honor to have you. I mean that when I wrote my book, When Words Don't Come Easy, and I had been talking to Dave Blanchard, a friend of both of ours, and we had been going through the whole process. And he was like, "Hey, don't worry about the editing stuff. Don't worry about what's next, the publishers and all that stuff. Let's just write the book." And I didn't know how big a deal that was. But when we got through and he thought we were done, he's like, "Hey, you're ready. You're ready for that next step," which was another fear of mine. I was like, "Oh, great. Now I got to meet someone else. And are we going to mesh and all the things?" But he said, "You know what? I have this friend named Jordan, and I think he would be perfect for you." So here I am, scared to death, going into a Zoom meeting with you. And dude, what I found out since then, but we couldn't have been more alike. Our personalities are so much alike. And then even our backgrounds and our history, we have so much in common. But dude, thank you so much for doing this. Looking back now throughout all the process and where we're at now, we've become friends. And I just want everybody else to get to meet you. And you have a story as well. But I'm so excited to have you, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you. And then we'll dive into some other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. I am a pastor's kid and grew up in ministry in, a household that was planting churches in the Dakotas is where we ended up, of all places, lots of snow. And what was, the interesting part about growing up in a church planter's home is there was just 4 of us, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I as our core group. And, and then what that means is if you don't have a drummer, you're a drummer now. If you don't have, you just fill in the gaps. And so growing up in the church, especially in church plants, I think has served so well in so many ways now because you learn how to do so much. Also, I can crush transparencies. I always switched them at the right time. But it gives you so many life skills, so many people skills. You watch your parents connect with people. And I think I just was able to carry that into, my adult years where I've started a couple businesses and most recently publishing company, Story Chorus. And I think what my parents gave me and what ministry experience gave me is just the ability to be curious about other people and to connect. And I think that's fundamentally, if you have those two inclinations, and maybe we could even call them skills, I think you can pretty well write your ticket. Because in whatever industry you're in or whatever you're trying to do or grow, if you can connect with people and be genuinely curious and interested about their lives, you can help a lot of people. And that gets you really far in life.
Dude, I told you we have so much in common. I'm a fellow PK guy as well, and that's so hilarious because I resonate with so many things you just said. The old transparencies, man, that was awesome. That was awesome. And I remember when we really got high tech and we thought, okay, it's time to level up. We would take the transparencies and put them in the printer and print them off. Because for the longest, I would write it myself, which was the worst idea ever.
With those expo markers, yes. Get a contact high, right?
Horrible, horrible.
Or change the lyrics.
Exactly. Make up your own lyrics.
Yeah.
So anyways, wow, good times. And same with us. I was number 5 though. So I had to wait my turn before I got to be the starting drummer, as we would always call it, starting drummer. So that's so funny. But anyways, man, so just to get started, you mentioned the business. How was it how did it work when you decided to start your own company? What was that like?
Well, it was really scary, honestly, because the first business I started back in 2014 went horrible. It absolutely failed. It tanked. And we ended up, after shutting it down, we technically got acquired, but really they paid us $8,000 for our equipment. And then I got a salary that was half of what my family needed. It was just brutal. And so that crashed and burned right when my wife was pregnant with our first daughter. And I didn't know if I had a job. She had postpartum preeclampsia, so was on high doses of, I think, magnesium, totally out of it, scared she was going to have a fatal seizure. And then our daughter, Fallon, I ended up a week after she was born in the ER with her, looking at her on the table, fully believing she was going to die. She was a hair's breadth from death. And all of that was happening at the same time. And because the company had been failing so much, we ended up in $18,000 of personal credit card debt because we couldn't pay ourselves anymore. And then I get this job offer that I was thinking was going to be great, and it was half of what we needed. And so that, now looking back, it was a very formative time, and I'm grateful, as we so often are, for our failures. That was a great learning season. But fast forward to 2018, when we started Story Chorus just a little over 4 years ago, the opportunity came up and I was like, heck no, techno. Like, there's no way. There's no way. I had said, like, I will never run a business again. I can't do business. I suck at it, all this stuff. And then Joelle said, my wife, she was like, well, why don't we pray about it? And I was like, why don't you just be quiet? Okay. We're not going to do this. And she's like, well, why don't we pray about it? So we drive to a Panera Bread. I remember exactly where we were. Neither of us wanted to do it, but we felt like God might be in it. And apparently we're supposed to obey him. So we started praying and had our eyes closed, and then both looked up and were crying, because we realized we're supposed to do this.
Wow.
And it was such a scary leap. But again, looking back, God's faithfulness and his faithfulness to lead us, and then to be really clear, because God isn't the author of confusion, right? He's clear with us. He doesn't play games with us. He's really gracious in that. And for us, it's always been, we're each other's fleece, right? It's like, I believe God's going to speak to Joelle the same way he speaks to me. And
Yes.
so we confirm it because we're one, right? So that's how we make decisions. We always have to be on the same page. And we made that decision, and it's the short of following Jesus, getting married is the best decision we've ever made.
Well, you guys are absolutely amazing. You're amazing. I can't imagine where my life would be without Story Chorus, without you, without Anna, the rest of the team, you guys, and Joel. Gosh, y'all are incredible. You are. So I skipped the question, and so I want to back up. But you're also a writer. You're a writer. You've been a writer for a long time. You've wrote your own books. You ghostwrite, and even so, I'm going to put two questions in one, if you can.
I
remember.
love those. Yeah.
So one, when did you know you wanted to be a writer? So that's the first one. You just remember that one, and then two, because there's a difference, and it's huge for both. There's not a wrong way, right? So for those who may, like, say there's someone out there who wants to write a book but don't know that they'll ever even have the time to do it, or they don't know that they know how to do it, then ghostwriting might be the way to go. You can still get your story out, and someone can write your story. So explain the difference between ghostwriting. For me, I absolutely, the therapy of writing, and you ended up editing mine, which was
right.
Another different ball game. It took it to a whole new level. But explain the difference between the two, and why it might be, because there might be someone out there who has never heard of an actual ghostwriter. I know I had never heard of it until I met you. So tell me, one, how old were you when you wanted to be a writer, and then go into that other part. Thanks so much, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was 15 when I first realized that I was a good writer. And the way that happened is I was in Latin class, because I was more of a mathlete than an athlete. So I was in Latin, and we got this assignment where we had to write some sort of paper on, a Roman god or goddess or whatever, right? Because we're learning all about that in Latin, learning to speak an absolutely dead, obsolete language. And so I chose this. I can't even remember what the god or goddess's name was, but I decided, like, hey, I'm going to write this whole story about this Roman goddess of vengeance. And that was this goddess was like, if someone does something bad, she's going to get you, right? Like, it was this cosmic justice kind of thing. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. So I wrote this story of someone found this ancient journal from this guy who, was serving this goddess. And it was like a 7-day journal of him, like, carrying out, like, vengeance and, like, justice, kind of like this mini superhero, right? And I mean, I was super into fantasy. I'm a Lord of the Rings kid. So I was really nerdy. So I went full out on this thing, like, full on, just nerdcore, writing this fantasy story and all this fighting and all this stuff. And it ended up being like 20 pages, which was, it just went, I was just in the groove and I loved it. And so I go to turn it in when it's due. And then she announces to the class, hey, we're going to be reading our papers in front of the whole class. And I was like, man,
that is awesome.
Not only am I in a class with a bunch of nerds, now I am going to be the nerd of nerds. And that can't be good for my dating life, or, the non-existent one. And then she goes, Jordan, let's have you go first.
And guys, we're going to take the next week to hear Jordan's papers.
For real. And it was, I had a stack. Awesome. It was like a camel choker of a paper, right? And so I get up there and I start reading it, and I am shaking because I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. People are going to think I'm the biggest nerd. And I just kept my eyes on the page. I read the thing. It probably took me like half an hour. I don't know. And then, but by the end of it, I was like kind of getting into it and was just like, whatever, you just got to own it. And when I was done, the class literally stood up and clapped.
That's
and then
incredible.
Kids were like, can you write more of this? And I was just blown away, right? That anybody would like it. And I was like, well, that made me feel really good. But then the teacher was in the back with her arms folded with this kind of scowl on her face. Mrs. Brandt, thank you very much. And she starts grilling me in front of the whole class. I remember her asking, "What's a vagabond?" and all these words that I use, in the paper. And I told her, and then she goes, "You didn't write that. That is way too good for a 10th grader to write.
Oh my
You
goodness.
didn't." In front of the whole class. And I was like, I did. And anyway, so I connected her with my AP English teacher, and she looked at it and she was like, "No, he can write that." But instead of making me, which she never apologized in front of the class, by the way, but whatever.
Oh, Miss Brandt. If you're out there,
Yeah.
Miss Brandt, we want to talk to you. I'm going to have her on the podcast next week for sure.
Yeah. Salve
crazy.
magistra. That's hello, teacher. So I realized, though, after leaving that class, I was like kind of upset and embarrassed at first.
Yeah.
But then it hit me. Holy cow. I was such a good writer. She didn't even think I should be capable of that.
It's incredible.
And so that just confirmed to me, like, wow, maybe I could be a writer someday. And it was a long journey to get here, right? But that was a super formative moment in my life where it set up this just real confidence, not cockiness or whatever, but this real confidence, like, hey, you can do work that people can't believe you're capable of.
It's so true. And I do say that many times. Sometimes your gifts, because I tell this to our coaches on our team, or sometimes you have a gift that you don't even realize is a gift because it comes so natural and so easy to you. It doesn't mean you don't need to work on it and get better at it. But sometimes this gift is so easy to you that you don't even realize that you're blessed with such a gift. So I always say, whatever the easiest thing is for you, that means it might just be what you're called to do. It might just be what you need to explore more. I love that. Would you touch on the difference between editing and ghostwriting per se?
Yeah. So the ghostwriting model is actually the oldest way to write a book. It's ancient. It's thousands of years old. And the OG ghostwriters were called an amanuenses, that would be it. It actually means slave at handwriting. But it was a nerd friend who came alongside a leader, and the leader would talk and process out loud, and they were very trusted. And the amanuenses would gather their thoughts and then put them together in some sort of, official decree or scrolls or books or whatever it was going to be, some histories. And they understood the leader so well because they were curious and could connect, right? They understood the leader so well, they were able to put it together, kind of put more meat on the bones and help understand what they mean to say. And then the leader was able to save so much time because they could sit for, however long, talk a bit, and then boom, out comes this product. And so that's what a ghostwriter really does. Is it's not, I think people get scared and feel like, oh my gosh, this is cheating, or this isn't my ideas, or this isn't my content. It's actually just a really old way to write books that leaders have used for thousands of years. So that's really what a ghostwriter is. And then editing, like we did with you, it's taking something, beautiful and brilliant that you have and bringing other minds to it and beating it up a little bit, asking questions, going deeper on some things, making some connections, maybe reordering some things, and it just makes it better. A great editor makes anything better. When I write books, I have an editorial team that I use too. It's the same team, we use for all of our clients too. It's a great editor makes everything better.
It's so true, man. I try to tell people, and I try to put it in my own words. So I'm not fancy like you, Jordan, but I would say it was like if you wrote a song and it's just you and your guitar, say you wrote it with your acoustic guitar, and then you send that off to somebody, and it's like what they do is they come in and they add all this stuff to it. They may add the full band to it, and they may change a little bit of the lyrics, and they get it in the studio, and it comes out this beautiful work of art. So it's so awesome. And I absolutely loved it. I do want to, we're going to kind of shift gears here, and the reason you're on, and not just besides all the other stuff you have. You brought so much knowledge already that I think is going to help some people. But dude, when my book came out, so this would have been September 27th. We had our launch, our book release. And now looking back, I had no clue, bro. I had no clue till recently in some of your posts. You've been open about this. And so that's why I wanted you on the podcast. But, my book is my story about depression. I mean, there's so much more to it as well. But the big main point is about depression. And then recently I found out that you were going through some hard times, even while this book was coming out. Mm-hmm. And we're going to dive into that a little bit. And I just know as a friend, because I do consider you a friend, a very close friend. Now, again, likewise, we started off, we didn't know each other, but we have built a beautiful relationship. And so I
didn't take long, man. Did it?
No, it didn't. It's always felt natural. It really did.
Yeah.
So, and then recently I was like, bro, I saw your post. I was like, dude, you never told, which I get it. I was the same way. We live in isolation. Nobody wants to hear your stuff, and we hold on to our own weight. But recently you talked about how even at that time you were having suicidal thoughts. You were going through you have bipolar. You were just a lot of struggles that you were facing, and that looking from the outside in, I watched you guys and I thought, man, you're a champion of champions, and that you have this business, and it's, books are coming out left and right. And I'm like, man, this dude is on a high right now. And now looking back, I'm like, I feel horrible that I never stopped and said, Jordan, dude, are you okay? Is everything good? Because looking at you from afar, you had a smile on your face and everything looked perfect, bro. It did. Will you tell me, do you remember when your bipolar symptoms started, and then kind of go into what does bipolar even feel like?
Yeah. So, first of all, just to address something quick, like, I think that's a key thing is everyone's fighting a battle we can't see. So behind every smile is a war, right? Good. Behind every happy face is a battle that they might be losing. And we don't usually talk about it. I know I didn't talk about it because I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
I was totally embarrassed because I felt weak. I felt like I can't get control of my mind. I felt like I was just letting maybe, demonic oppression or whatever, right? Spiritualizing it and just all those things. And so just, I think approaching life from this way, that everyone is fighting a battle that you can't see, and they might be losing no matter the smiles. Their well-being is certainly not your responsibility, but if you can approach life this way and actually check in on people a little bit preemptively and dig a little past, the smile, you might find some stuff that you can help, and in helping others, you help yourself. And it started for me, the first time I remember ever wanting to, and if you have little ears around, I'm just going to be really honest, and it might be a little bit graphic. So just warning. But the first time I ever wanted to kill myself, I was 10 years old. And I just saw this picture in my head. I was outside shoveling, and I kept seeing this picture in my head that just wouldn't go away, of me laying on the sidewalk in the snow with blood all around me. And I had hit myself in the head with this metal shovel I was shoveling with. But the weirdest thing was, I wasn't like sad or depressed or upset or anything like that as a kid. It just seemed like something that would feel really, really good. It was like this pull, like you see a birthday cake as a kid and you're like, oh, I want to eat that. It was like, it was so twisted up that it seemed like a good thing to do. And so I held the shovel over my head for a little while, and I didn't obviously, do anything about it. And then I didn't say anything to my parents because even at 10, I knew like I probably shouldn't think things like this. And that might be bad. I might get in trouble. I might, I had a really traumatizing demonic encounter when I was 7. And so I started worrying throughout high school, then throughout at that point and all the way into almost into college, I was scared that I was like demon possessed and all of this stuff because all these urges were happening to kill myself. And so those were the really lows. But then bipolar also brings super highs. So you have depression and suicidal ideation, and then you have mania, right? Where you get manic. But when you get manic, you feel amazing. Like it's this incredible feeling where you feel like you could change the world in 2 seconds. You just feel like invincible. But the problem is you don't sleep, you hardly eat. And for me, I started as a writer and musician. I would start writing stuff. I would start making music, whatever. And I mean, I would do this for like 3 days straight and not sleep and just be completely convinced I was doing probably the greatest work that has ever been done in the world. And I would send it out to all these people, especially as I became an adult. I would email it out to like 30, 40 people. And then after I came back down, I would realize what I did and realize a lot of times it was like kind of gibberish. Like it didn't make sense because I just wasn't connected to reality. And then I was really embarrassed. And so it was this cycle of up, down, up, down, up, down. And it was really starting to ruin my life.
Were you reluctant to, because I know recently you came down here, Dallas, Texas, and we got to see you got to catch up. Were you reluctant to get treatment or were you excited about that?
Super reluctant. So my wife and I got married young. We got married at 20, and I didn't get the official diagnosis till I was 27. So there were 7 years where she knew obviously something was going on. And so she would beg me to go see a doctor. But in my mind, that was just being weak. It was admitting, kind of defeat. It was admitting that I'm not strong enough to handle the world and all those kind of things, or it meant I was lazy or I was looking for a shortcut. And so I was just super twisted in my thinking about it. And what finally made me go in originally, I guess 8 years ago, was she was pregnant with, our first daughter, Fallon. And she asked me, what if Fallon struggles with this? How are you going to help your girl? How are you going to help your daughter if you won't even help yourself? And that cut deep, and that's super powerful. And I think it's, and if anyone's listening who's kind of in the same situation where it seems like something's going on, or you're worried, even if you're worried that it's just all in your head and you're making it up like I did, go get some help, because if you struggle with it, it's likely your kids will struggle with it as well. And if they do, what's your plan? How are you going to help your kids? And that's what spurred me to go. And that was the beginning of a real change. It didn't, I'm still very much on the journey, but I've really dove in, getting some brain scans, getting some, all in on it right now. Because I had some really close calls in the last year or two. It was just getting progressively worse. And so we got 3 kids now, and it was, how are you going to help these kids, and how are you going to be there for them right now? Yeah.
So how are you, man? How are you right now? And then what's next with that? I know you just had the scans, but what's next as far as the progression of finding out what to do with this?
Yeah. So right now, I'm actually really good.
Good.
The brain scan down at Amen Clinic is where we went. There's something unbelievable about seeing your own brain. Number one, I just was like, see, Joel, I have one. And it's not two raisins smushed together like we were worried about. But seeing your own brain and having the doctor walk through your scan and say, oh, well, your temporal lobes, which is where your emotional regulation happens, and all these different things that really contribute to bipolar, they're like half of them aren't getting any blood flow.
Wow.
And it looks like there's literal holes in my brain. There isn't, it's just mapping blood flow. And then I've had tremendous difficulty with anxiety, like pretty crippling anxiety, constant stomach aches, panic attacks for no reason, not being able to sleep for days, just real issues. And they take a scan of your brain while you're working, solving problems, and then they take a scan of your brain while you're at rest. And you would expect your brain to be more active when you're working and focused on something. Well, when she showed me that scan versus my brain at rest was about 5 times more active.
Wow.
And she was like, you're looking at a very noisy, anxious brain.
Wow.
And so I have always worked a lot, and I mean, frequently starting at like 2:30 in the morning, I've always kept really weird hours. But it was getting worse and worse, and I was taking time away from my family. But she said, you know what? The volume of work you do is actually a self-medication to tune the noise down, to keep the anxiety away. Because when you're working, that's when your brain can finally be quiet. And so you get this information. I'm not telling everyone they got to go do this, but for me, seeing that and seeing literal broken parts of my brain, I started crying because I realized, like, I always felt so ashamed and so bad about myself, so weak. But then I realized it was kind of like if you were running a race and losing and looking at everybody else running with great legs, but you have a broken leg and you can't figure out why you can't keep up, why you can't win the races. And then when you realize that, you suddenly don't feel like as much of a failure. You realize that there's just something broken, and now we can fix it. And so that has been, that was huge. That was a big catalyst. But you mentioned the Facebook post. And I think if there was any one message I could really leave people with, it would be, if you're struggling, I'm not saying right now, but at some point you need to share your story. You need to share your journey. I wrote a big, long Facebook post with a picture of me in a brain scanner. And I thought maybe a few people would be like, oh, okay, yeah, thank you for sharing, whatever. And it kind of blew up. And I just shared kind of my story in a nutshell, but pretty graphically, with suicide and having hallucinations and depression and like all of these things. And of course, just like you, Andy, nobody knew, because that might be a downfall of growing up a PK. You're really good at pretending. You're really good at playing the part. Yeah. You're really good at playing your part, and you know how to do that. You know how to chameleon. And so I was really skilled in that, unfortunately. But the positive side is, number one, I actually had a stomach ache the whole day. I was super embarrassed because I was like, gosh, did I really share that? But again, I felt the Lord tell me to do it, so I did it. And then I was like, oh, my clients are going to see it, like, oh, Andy's going to see it. Like, everybody's going to see it, and they're going to be like, well, are my projects going to be okay? Like, are you crazy? Like, I was so scared of that and so scared to be judged. But in reality, even beyond the nice messages and 500 plus comments and all that kind of stuff, I probably got about 60 messages, texts, calls, Facebook messages, not just saying thank you, but saying, I really wish my husband could have read this before he killed himself. Wow. I really wish that my son would have seen this before he killed himself.
Wow.
I really wish. And so many stories, another guy's brother taking his life, dozens of people with stories of suicide, just absolutely wrecking their life. And I think like the pinnacle of it, not in a good way, but I was with a friend who very similar to me, very similar to us. He was a pastor and all these kind of things, just a great, super dynamic dude. And he came up to me and was like, "Hey, I got to talk." And we went backstage at church and he goes, "Dude, your post was really important for me." He said, "A year ago, my wife had to break down a door to the office that I had locked. And I was right in the middle of committing suicide in the closet. And she found me and she saved me because I wasn't in my right mind."
Oh.
And now he's getting help, but he was just locked up. Right. And so when you share your story, you help so many more people than you could ever imagine. And you help yourself because dark things can't survive in the light. And when you bring things into the light, you can heal those places that have never been healed. And you can move past some things, I think, break some chains that only exist in isolation. And when you share your story, as well as people saying thank you, you should imagine the sound of chains hitting the floor.
That is so good, man. It is so, and it's true. The enemy, talk about darkness, and we're both believers. And if you're watching this and you're not a believer, I respect where you're coming from. But from a biblical background, I know that when that darkness and light, they can't compete. Light wins every time. God wins every time. And when we bring it to light, the devil, man, would love nothing more than you to stay isolated. Would love nothing more for you to stay locked in your cage and just away from people. And that had to be a relief when you saw the results of the scan, knowing, hey, there is something here, that there is something. I am not crazy, and I don't want to use that term loosely. I remember at the book release party, we were there together. Thank you
Which
for
was
coming.
A magical night, by the way.
Dude, it was
absolutely
one of my favorite
stunning
nights of my life. It really was. But what I had an epiphany myself that night. And I don't like the attention. I'm a very easygoing guy, and to have that many people come from all over the U.S. and just say all these nice, kind things. It was embarrassing. I didn't like it, but at the same time, it was overwhelming in a powerful, positive way. But I remember that night just wishing, man, I wish everybody could feel what I felt. And what happens though so many times is we wait until we're on the other side of the coffin to share those thoughts. It's like Joe was a good guy, or Joe was a good dad, or all these things. My heart today is, look to your friends, look to your family, give them those flowers. You know, that old saying, give them those flowers while they're living. Give them those, take some time out of your day. Maybe someone's on your heart right now. Send them a text message.
Yeah.
Let them know you love them and that you care about them. You're just thinking about them. It's not weird. See, most times what happens is you start hearing these, well, this is going to be weird, which means why you should probably do it. Now, if it is extremely weird, ask somebody. Maybe a good friend will say, hey, don't do that. But no, the enemy would love to keep you from doing that because, again, suicide, anxiety, depression, all these things are at an all-time high right now. And so my hope is that this podcast right now, this episode right here, will save a life. And so my last question, I guess, or we may wrap it up in another way, but one more question on, as someone with bipolar, what is it that you would like? What would help you? Like if someone, because I had no idea, and this is all very new to me, and I'm learning more and more about it. But say someone has a spouse, someone has a friend, a family member whatever with bipolar, what is it that you need from us that would be helpful in someone's life?
And this is the real trick, because if you are in a very dark place, domination happens in isolation, and bipolar loves isolation. Mental health disorders and in problems love isolation. And the issue is not only um so let's say I'm in a really bad place and someone compliments you and they're like affirming you and like, man, I love you, and this all these wonderful things. You can't even receive it. You don't believe it. It's like planting seed on a sidewalk. It's just, at least for me, but in my experience talking with some other people too,
Wow.
it's like you don't even have the capacity to believe that about yourself, because you fundamentally lack the ability to be loved, to allow yourself to be loved. That is a very difficult thing. And I think what people can do to help best is notice some things, maybe see some patterns, and I think even beyond affirming them, like, yeah, still say the things, but share stories, find some people like them who would be someone they would kind of respect, that they would see like, oh, this CEO talked about this, or this, professional podcaster guy, or this, whatever it is, like share something with them to say, hey, I think you should really listen to this. And and ultimately understand that unless they're willing to accept some help, you can't force it.
Yeah.
And don't feel responsible for it.
Yeah.
But I think that's one simple thing you can do is, yes, keep affirming, but bring someone else into the conversation where they might be able to receive it. Because a lot of times the most important people in our life, if they'll say something and it goes in one ear and out the other, someone else will say the exact same thing, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. And then your wife's over here like, yep, I didn't say that to you for 7 years.
Yeah.
That's a real problem. But it's ultimately like a struggle of not even being able to receive love from people because you have such a broken self-concept, and and frankly, you, like, for me, I won't call other people this, but for me, I was literally crazy at times. I lost touch with reality. I was hearing voices. I was seeing things. Like I believed crazy things. Like you're not even with it sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to reason with someone who's beyond reason in a time. And so
that makes sense.
Yeah. And so it's very difficult. But that's like my simplest advice.
Well, man, I thank you again for the courage and the vulnerability. I really believe with all my heart this episode is going to help so many people that we may not even be able to see all the years down the road that this one episode is going to be shared to help so many people. So thank you. And number two, in closing, getting back to the beginning where we came from, for someone who's interested in writing a book, whether it's ghostwriting, whether it's just having you edit it, or even the publishing side of things, they want to get in contact with you. Let me first say Story Chorus is the best. They're the best. So how do they reach out to you? How do they find you and find Story Chorus?
Thank you so much. Yeah. So you can head to storychorus.com, and it's chorus like singing, CHORUS, and read a little bit about us. And there's a button there where you can, schedule a chat. And then I'm on Instagram at Loftis Writes, LOFTIS. And then I'm also on, on Facebook, and I post a lot of more personal stuff. I run a ministry called shortdailydevotions.com. and do daily devotions there. And so there's a few places you can connect on the spiritual side, on a kind of a personal mental health level, family level, and then on a book level.
Yeah. Well, dude, hey, this has been fun because one, we get to talk all the time, but getting to bring your story to however many that are going to hear it has been so fun. So I thank you again, and man, God bless, buddy.
Thank you so much. It was awesome being on, and thanks everyone for listening.
Wow, Jordan. Wow, man. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart and for having the courage to tell your story. I know that it's not only going to help you, but it's going to help thousands of others. And I'm so grateful to call you friend and to have you on this podcast. Thanks for all you do for me and for everybody here who listens to the podcast, man. I appreciate you so much. I promised at the beginning that we would be giving a brand new resource away, and here's how you get that. Go to andyhoward.com/mind, M-I-N-D. andyhoward.com/mind for a brand new resource. You can grab a free 6-week guide to overcome anxiety, fight fear, and get real hope in depression and more. I truly believe this is going to change your life. So get a copy, share it with a friend who needs it, and join me next week for more. The next 6 weeks, we are going to have some amazing interviews and some amazing stuff on the real issues. So I can't wait for you to join me. Again, if you are brand new, please share this podcast with somebody that it'll be a blessing to. I know Jordan's story will help so many people. So as God laid somebody on your heart as you were listening to this, please share this episode with them. If you haven't got the book yet, you can learn more about how to do that at andyhoward.com. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Audible, where I will even read it for you, and also on Kindle. Also, sign up for the newsletter that will keep you up to date on all the latest things that are going on in my life and where I will be speaking. I will be over the next month. We'll be in Arizona and even Georgia. I even got a conference coming up soon. Would love to catch up with you or connect with you if I'm ever in your part of the world. Again, thanks so much for being a part of this, and share this episode with someone it could be a blessing to. God bless everybody.